welcome to episode 25 of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. I'm Kimberly, your host, and I was super excited to be here with you today. Did You Bring the Hummus is a podcast to help you go vegan. Every 2 weeks, I'll share a new episode discussing all things vegan. Most importantly, we'll talk about how to embrace this meaningful decision with fervor and fun. Episodes post every other Monday on your favorite podcast app. Before we get started, I have one very important question for you. Did you bring the hummus? Today, I am joined by Beverly Zeimet. Beverly is an international #1 best-selling author and speaker, workshop facilitator, energy healer, virtual reality ambassador, and transformational coach. Additionally, she has been in the field of alternative medicine for over 40 years. Today, you'll hear about Beverly's journey from farm girl to a vegan, about raw food, and listening to that inner voice. Let's get started. Hi, Beverly. Thanks so much for being here with me tonight.
Well, hello, Kimberly. It is great to be here. I love the whole thought of hummus. I love it. I love it. And we're going to get into that later in the show, and I will share a recipe with your audience here. So
Very
yeah, one of my
excited.
secret trades.
Oh boy.
But it's
So
a
you got to
pleasure to be here.
listen to the end of the episode.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. Well, Beverly, I'd love to hear about your vegan journey. Why don't we start there? How'd you
Oh
get to this
gosh.
point?
Well, you know what? I grew up on a farm and we raised our own beef and pork and chickens and everything, right? So it's kind of interesting how I ended up being a complete non-eater, meat eater. So,
Mhm.
gosh, I would say I started really moving away from a lot of meat after I left the farm because it just didn't taste that good.
Hmm.
Right. So my meat eating days were slowed down quite a bit. However, it was in the 90s. I want to say roughly 92, 93. And I was moving into a very, very intense spiritual journey at that time and really working in the arts of energy and healing and the psychic work and, you know, all of that, and really moving into the next phase of what my life and where my life was going to take me. And so when, just studying the whole metaphysical world to really increase your overall vibration and frequency and things, eating meat was something that held you in a lower vibration. And I read that and I knew it. I never really put it to work until one day I heard this little voice, and I always listen to my voices. That's that intuition, that inner gut
Yeah.
feeling, that inner knowing. It's to pay attention to that because there's great messages. And I was eating a pork chop. I love pork chops, right? And I took a bite and it just didn't taste the same. And it wasn't any different than I had always made it. So I took a second bite and I'm like, this just isn't cutting it. So I asked the kids and their dad, I said, do these pork chops taste okay? Right? I really did, because it was like, oh my gosh. And they were like ranting at me, yeah, Mom, these are really good. Yeah, these are great. And I said, well, if somebody wants an extra one, you can have mine. And then I heard the voice say, stop eating meat. Okay, so I did. And
Okay.
that's how simple it was. I just stopped.
Yeah.
And it's a process, but you got to let your body start to acclimate. So the first thing, I stopped eating meat. I did like meat byproducts, at first, moving into the vegetarian aspect of it, where I had chicken broth or beef broth or something like that, and I did eat some dairy, the butter and,
Mhm.
and my body started acclimating. And then pretty soon it's like, oh, time to move away from that. Oh, time to move away from that. Oh, time to move away from that. Right. And, as my vibration started elevating, it went in segments. And then it's not such a deep shock to the body. You just don't wake up one day and say, oh, well, I'm stopping all of this. Your body's going to go into shock. It really does, and adding that different food to it. but being a vegetarian for like a year or so, I was exposed to raw food, and that was towards the middle and the latter part of the 90s. It got to be a big thing. And I spent a
Mm.
lot of time in California. And so I was invited to a raw food, how to prepare raw food, how to become a raw food, eater. And it's like, okay. So I went to it. I was like totally amazed, right? Because when you really stop and think, how many foods do you eat that are actually raw? Like radishes, carrots,
Yeah.
celery, broccoli, cauliflower, all of these different things. You have your lettuces, so there's
Hmm.
so many that you're already eating raw. And for
Yeah.
me, I can remember as a kid, one of my favorite raw foods was raw potatoes. And I still to this day love raw potatoes. I don't know why, right?
I used to
And
eat them as a kid too.
yeah, there's just something about it, the juiciness and that
That
starch, which is
crunch.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And they're just a little bit sweet,
Hmm.
and I can remember we're sitting there waiting for the program to start, and there was a gal that sat across the table from me, and she asked me, you know, was this my first time I've been here? Am I a raw foodist? And I said, actually, this is just an introduction for me, and I talked to her a little bit about it. And she said, oh my gosh, going raw, she said, was really pretty easy. But one of the toughest things for me was to eat a raw potato. And that's the thing I remember the most about that meeting, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, for me, it's like not a problem.
Hmm.
Not a problem at all, right? So it's interesting how those little things just kind of stick with you.
Hmm.
And one thing I learned that I've taken with me on my journey through all my different eating patterns was the food combining. And that is really critical because a lot of people think eating, going vegan or raw food or vegetarian means that you just don't eat meat, but you can eat all the other junk.
Mm.
Not so much, right? And so a lot of people who stop that, all of a sudden they start to see their health declining or their
Mm.
weight going on. So you have to understand it's not just stop eating meat or meat byproducts. There's more to it. It's that nutritional value. Where are you going to get your proteins? It's the combination of foods. So when you can combine rice and beans, you're getting a strong protein,
Hmm.
right? So if you're serious about moving into the vegan way of eating, also understand the nutritional value. Go to the raw food and study the raw food combining charts. Just Google it. Google knows everything, right? So
Doesn't
so go ahead.
it?
It does, right? So Google raw food combining, and you will be totally amazed. And that's going to really help you to understand the best foods to eat, when to eat them, what's alkaline, what's acid, so that you can start to balance that because you want to keep your body in an alkaline situation because when it goes acid, you're not retaining the nutrients that are necessary. Right? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. When I was in my mid-20s, I went macrobiotic for a little bit, and
Oh yeah, I
there's
tried
a
that one too.
there's a lot of talk of alkaline versus acid, and I
Right.
do remember it was a lot of work. I spent hours in the kitchen, but I felt so good. And I was life just wasn't I wasn't in a place in life where I was willing to spend that much time on preparing my food in my mid-20s, and so I kind of let it go after like 6 months, but I still remember how amazing I felt when I ate that way. And I
Right.
think I was really getting balanced, a lot more of that alkaline over the
Yeah,
acid.
the acid alkaline. So if you just print off the food combining chart,
Hmm.
because it kind of breaks it down the center, and then it takes you which foods are acid and which foods are alkaline. So if meats are highly acid,
Yeah.
they're at the far end of the acid chart. So when you look at that, you know and how many ounces of it are you eating, then you come to the other side. So you want to balance that with the alkaline foods so that your
Mhm.
body starts to balance out in alignment and in harmony. And it will also speed up and help your digestion, right?
Yeah.
And digestive enzymes, I mean, oh my gosh, get yourself on some digestive enzymes because we don't have the enzymes in the food that we once had,
Mhm.
right? And so, and it doesn't matter whether you're a vegan or carnivorous, even the macrobiotic, you want that digestive, system to start working. But when you're looking for digestive enzymes, make sure when you read the bottle that you've got all those things that end in ASE, like
Mm.
protease, lipase, amylase. So you want to look at the ASEs because there's
Got
tons
it.
of digestive enzymes, but look for the ones that have the ASE, and that's critical for you. Yeah.
Okay. There's a local farm by me here in New Jersey, and their whole focus is in bringing the nutrients back to the soil so
Oh,
that
wonderful.
when you eat food, you eat carrots that have been grown there, you just brush the dirt off and you eat the carrot.
Hmm.
And there's, enzymes there, and the soil is like, it's not going to make you sick. It's giving you those enzymes that you need. You
Right.
pick up a bunch of kale and you shake it off so there's not huge chunks of dirt or bugs on it. And you just eat it like that. You don't have to give it a good scrubbing, but the stuff we're getting at the grocery store, you need to, right? You've got to make
Right.
sure that you wash it, and it hasn't been grown in this nutrient rich soil. So you're right. Like, we're just not getting the same level of like health from the vegetables that we would if they were grown in the dirt, like at the farm that's near me. Yeah. Or
Well,
like
you're
it used to
fortunate.
be.
You're fortunate. That's
Very much
awesome.
so.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to be said about hydroponic.
Mm,
And everyone can create a hydroponic, garden in their garage or even in a space in their house because it doesn't take up a lot of room, and start growing some hydroponic things, and so you don't have to worry about dirt being all over the place. And
yeah.
when the kids knock into it, it's just a water spill.
I didn't know that about hydroponic, that it's so easy and that you can just kind
You
of
know,
do it
it,
at
it
home.
really is.
Yeah.
It is, I, Google that too, or go to Pinterest. Oh my gosh, go to Pinterest and type in
Yeah.
hydroponics. You're going to get so many different things. I love Pinterest for things like
Oh,
that,
it's so fun.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I'd love to go back to something you said when we first started, where you were
Uh-huh.
talking about eating meat and how it lowers your vibration.
Sure.
And I just love for you to say more about that, as I'm right on board with you. But I wanted you to share that with the listeners. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, everything is a frequency. Everything on the planet is a frequency. And when you look at your physical body's chemistry is made up of like what 80% water, and the rest is solid matter. But each organ and each cell in your body has to resonate with a certain vibration and a certain frequency. And when it's all in alignment, you're going to feel healthy. When it moves out of alignment, what happens? Houston starts having a problem,
Yep.
right? And so
Yeah.
understanding frequencies is probably a key way to start, looking at that perspective. Where are you on your spiritual growth? When you're eating heavy foods, even heavy carbs, so it's not
Mhm.
just meat, but heavy carbs, things that weight you down not only physically, but mentally and emotionally, and then of course spiritually, right?
Mhm.
So if you're on that journey, and again, look at different cultures like the Native American, right? When they hunted, they didn't hunt for sport. They hunted to support themselves in nature to be able to exist. And they were highly, highly spiritual people.
Mhm.
So when they went hunting, they had their little ceremonies and prayed to the gods, right? That animal, that buffalo or that deer, the elk, whatever it was that they were hunting for the food supply chain to keep on going for the ecosystem, you know, they made that intention,
Mhm.
and then they went out with that intention in mind. And before they pulled the trigger on that bow, they laid gratitude for the animal that was giving up its life to sustain life for those that were going to enjoy. And not only did it, you know, sustain food, they use every part of the animal. The hides were their clothing. It was their houses, how they covered it up, to stay away from the weather, all of these different things. And those are things that we can learn along the way and be grateful. Be grateful for that seed that turned into that carrot. Be
Mhm.
grateful for whatever food it is that you're eating. A lot of religions, the majority of religions do what? And even in cultures, they prayed over the meal before
Mhm.
it was served and eaten. That changes a molecular structure and increases the ability for that food to pass out what no longer serves the purpose, but to maintain the sustenance necessary for that human element to continue in a healthy journey, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what food that is, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it depends on where you are in your spiritual journey and how you're looking to move past it. Not all meat eaters aren't highly spiritual or aren't resonating at a high level of frequency. It's where you are on that journey, right? And again, when you change that molecular structure, you're also altering things and bringing back into it what is your intention. And
Mhm.
that is really relevant in my belief. And we forget about those things. So
Yeah.
be grateful for everything that crosses your path, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
does
like
does
that.
that help explain a little bit about what that energy and that spiritual level is?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you.
We look at the traditional things in what you eat for breakfast
Mhm.
and what you eat for lunch or dinner and what you eat for dinner or supper, however, what part of the country you're in or what culture you're in, right? It took me
Yeah.
a long time to get out of dinner and supper and go to lunch and dinner. Oh my goodness. So growing up, what do we have for breakfast? We had bacon, eggs, pancakes. What are all on the menu when you go out for breakfast? Those certain foods. So
Yeah.
we've been programmed to eat those certain foods. Same
Mhm.
thing with lunch, same thing with dinner. And most people make the last meal of the day their biggest meal.
Yep.
And this is where it's really critical, regardless of what you call yourself, right?
Mhm.
Is if you're going to eat a heavy meal, whether it includes meat or byproducts or not, don't eat it after 6 o'clock at night. Right? And try to
Yeah.
eat it as your middle meal, because your body's going into digestion. And
Mm.
after 6 o'clock, it's not going to digest anymore. And you're going to be moving into repair mode. So if your body's trying to fight digesting when it's trying to do repair, we got a conflict of interest. And
Yeah.
that can be critical for how your body absorbs the nutrients. And so kind of watch that. And another thing I want to say about, in that carnivorous field is it takes 72 hours to digest meat.
Mm.
So think about that. If you're eating meat at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, what's going on here? How much of it's actually digesting? How
Yeah.
much of it stays within, the intestinal tract that doesn't get out? And
Mhm.
then it festers. And now you're creating what? A lot of mucus. You're creating a breeding place for parasites and all these
Mhm.
crazy things, right? So if you are a meat eater out there and you're listening to this, which you shouldn't be because we're but that's okay. You're looking how to really make that shift.
Yeah.
Don't eat it in the evening. So stay focused on where it is that you're going. So let's go back to breakfast. This is my most fun one, and I'll share a little
Sure.
story. when I was shifting out of that programming of what you eat for breakfast. So it's like, okay, I'm going to have this big salad for breakfast. Now we're looking at 7 o'clock in the morning. All right. Put this big salad in front of me, and it's got, instead of carrots, because there's a lot of sugar in carrots, I would shred sweet potatoes instead because they're
Okay.
just like carrots on a salad. I add a little bit of celery and, I'm not sure everything else that I put on there. This is beautiful, beautiful salad, and I had my homemade dressing. And I put it on there and I looked at that and I looked at the clock and I said, this is 7 o'clock in the morning. What the heck are you doing eating this salad? Right? It's like, okay, I can do this, right? I took a bite of that salad. And as I chewed it, the juices started flowing from my mouth, and that's where the enzyme activity starts, is in the mouth. And I was savoring it. And, when you hold things in your mouth, and especially when it crosses under your tongue, all of that's going directly to the brain. I started feeling like alerted. It's like all my cells in my body were starting to dance. I mean,
Just celebrating. Yay!
it was. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I would, if somebody would have told me that, I said, yes, you're right.
Right.
But the experience is really a beautiful experience, right? So try
Yeah.
that sometime. Just make this beautiful salad, because again, the visual of the food that you eat sends a message to your body, because all your senses, you've got your sight, you've got your smell, you've got your taste, and then you have the hearing when you start crunching, right?
Yeah.
And really savor your food. How many of us just push it in there like you're starving, and you don't take your time
Yeah.
to actually chew it and get it moving the way it needs to, because it is about chewing. I mean, watch animals. They don't just eat and run,
Right.
right? They savor that. Right? I mean, a cow is a vegetarian, a vegan. Actually, a cow is a
Yeah.
vegan, right?
Yep.
It's crazy, right? What do? They sit there for hours and hours and
Just
hours.
chewing and chewing. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's so many things that we can learn. And grazing, animals are grazers. What are we? We're an animal. We're a warm-bodied human. Warm-blooded means, look at what warm-blooded creatures do. Grazing is really awesome because it doesn't stuff everything and put like stress to try to digest things. And the more you chew, the easier it is on your digestive system. And when those juices start getting into the stomach, it triggers the stomach to go into the liver, trigger the gallbladder to send the enzymes necessary. It also triggers the pancreas to trigger those enzymes, because you want to break down fat, you want to break down sugars, and you want to break down starches. And talking about that, I mean, starches, let's just touch on starches a little bit. A lot of people think, oh my God, starches are going to make me fat.
Yeah.
No. If you believe that, then it's going to happen. Again, change your belief system and your mindset. Starches are really healthy. And again, one of the things I learned in the raw food diet was really the necessity of what's the value of starches, and especially eating them raw, like a potato, right? Because and another really good one is taro root.
Oh yeah.
For a vegan, there's a lot more starches in that taro root. And it's very good. And you can use it in soups. You can use it in, you can make it like mashed potatoes. You can actually make a shake out of them. Taro is so good for so many things, but it's that starch that makes it valuable. It's high intensity carbs, because carbs do what? They break down to sugars. So a high carb diet is going to give you sugar spikes, just as if you were eating a lot of sugar.
Mm,
And now there's like, I think they figure the last count was like 70 or 80 different words.
that's insane.
Just say it's sugar.
Sugar.
Right?
Yep.
It's sugar. So it's like, oh my gosh, you have to be an encyclopedia to figure out, is this sugar? Does this word mean sugar?
Right.
You know.
And how
So
many
it's,
products have multiple sugars on
oh
their label,
my
right? So
gosh.
they'll have the word sugar and then there'll be like 6 other things that are
Right.
also sugar ending in OSE, right? The sugar. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a good sign. That
Hmm.
OSE. We talk about
Yeah.
OSE, ASE, and so these are little tricks of the trade. Another
Hmm.
thing, when you go shopping, okay, if you shop the outside of the supermarket, you're going to have a balanced diet. It's
Mm.
when you start going down the aisles when things start,
Yep.
not being quite as healthy as they should be, because they're what? They're canned, they're processed, and you got to take that into consideration.
So what about lunch? So we talked about breakfast. Let's have a big salad for breakfast.
Yeah,
And so lunch then I'm guessing should be the big meal, since you mentioned that dinner should be smaller.
exactly. Yeah. So if
So
you're
what
going to
about
do
lunch?
carbs, yeah. So if you're going to do carbs, do them for lunch. And the reason why I say this, because when do most people lag?
Right, like two
Right.
o'clock, right? In the afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah, sometime after lunch,
Yeah.
right? Because now your body's in full blown. I got to break this stuff down. I got to digest
Mm.
this stuff, because you know what? We're coming up, because it's going to be a few more hours and then we're going to go into repair mode, right? So that's why you want to do a light, a light meal at dinner time, and stay away from all that heavy carbs, because, so if you do carbs at your lunchtime, you'll find that you're going to get these little sugar boosts along the way that's going to keep you, elevated. But
Okay.
again, don't do tons of it, because you get a spike up, and then you're going to crash and burn.
Mm.
So again, balance yeah, balance that out, but do your majority of carbs at that middle meal. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
And then,
what about with the fiber from all of the other vegetables? Does that play into avoiding spikes when you're eating a lot of carbs? Now we're talking about whole
well,
foods carbs, not like refined carbs. But
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Oh, fiber, think about fiber. Fiber creates a friction,
Mm,
right? Okay. And so fiber is what helps to break the food down.
okay.
It's what helps it to digest, and it's what helps it to move through the small intestinal tract and move and push out through the large intestinal tract. So fiber is what things cling to and draw it out. You think about, some of the clothes that you wear.
Hmm.
And if you get around a bunch of dog hair, what happens? Boom, it just sticks, right?
Yep.
So when you're eating, fiber kind of just does that. So the debris of the things that aren't digesting for whatever reason, like peelings,
Hmm.
especially on tomatoes and
Mm,
cucumbers, they don't digest, you
okay.
know, and corn is something that's really harsh for digestion,
Mm,
right? And even salads, again, that's why it's important to chew. And that's why it's important to have that balance, of what's going to break it apart. Those enzymes are really critical. And
hmm.
I'm a colon hydrotherapist, and that's what really opened my eye up, is watching
Okay.
all of these food particles come by that hadn't been digested. And
Mm.
the people will, they'd compliment on different things, and they'll say, was that corn I just saw go by? Right? And you're saying, yeah, it was. I haven't had corn in 5 years.
Oh no.
You know, so yeah, things can store in your intestinal tract for extended periods of time.
Mm,
Another thing that we watched, we had a gentleman that started coming to us, and he wasn't the healthiest one, and he actually lived off fast food.
mm,
you know,
yeah.
McDonald's and, burgers, fast food, stuff like that. And we told him,
Yeah.
so, you think you're young and invincible. it's going to catch up with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was like 45, 47. And he started doing a series of colonics. And about the third or fourth colonic, this might gross your listeners out, but I think it's really,
It's also
I think it's
fascinating.
critical. It is. It's critical that you understand, how this eating impacts you and why you have heart attacks. What that processed foods can do,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're eating a lot of fast foods, regardless of where it is. And it was a sludge of fatting. So if you've ever boiled chicken, right? And then you take it off the burner and you let it set, so that all the fat rises so you can throw it out, right?
Mm.
It before it does that, it gets like this little clumpy stuff.
Oh gosh.
That's okay. That's what this looked like. And now we have an inch tube on the colonic machine,
Mm-hmm.
and it came out and it went about 6 inches into the tube and it stopped.
Ooh.
And it was probably another 6 to 8 inches in the other tube where the water was flowing out. It plugged up the machine.
Oh my gosh.
So we actually had to stop the session, take the machine apart and clean it out. And you could tell, and we showed it to him, and we put some on a paper plate and we showed it to him, right? And just moved things around, and had him move it around where you can feel it was greasy. So he really got the visual of it.
Yeah.
So when you see something like that coming out, because everything's internal,
Mm-hmm.
and unless you experience that, out of mind, out of sight, out of
Yes,
sight, out of mind,
exactly. Yeah.
right? And that was his wake-up call. He stopped eating fast food, and he sat down after a session, because we went back and finished the session, and he said, okay, I'm going to listen. Tell me what I need to do. Right? Because again, that's what heart attacks happen. And it was, I think, like 5 years later, he came back. And really, wow. He looked like a whole different person. But he shared with us a sad story where his son had a massive coronary.
Oh my gosh.
And his son's diet was similar to what his was, and where he knew he was headed, but his son didn't want to listen. And he was grateful, that he paid attention. But again, it's your personal experience, it's your journey. And, so not everyone wants to pay attention to that. It's like, dad, you're, that's, whatever, whatever.
I'm not eating
But the young
vegetables.
man was, yeah. And I think his son was only like 37, 40, right? In that age, that's young, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting how life, puts you on these journeys, and how every modality that you get involved with, and how it impacts the way you ingest food, and with that belief system, with that trust system. So when you look at a vegan diet, make the choice for the right reason, not because it's a fad or anything like that. It's like, I really want to put myself on track to be nutritionally sound, to do everything that I can do from a vibrational standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, to make this skin suit that I'm running around in alignment and as healthy as possible. Because you don't have to go down the track. You don't have to be a statistic. You just have to know and put into action what it takes. Do you want to be 40 years old? Do you want to be 50 years old and not being able to walk because every joint in your body doesn't function the way it is? Or do you want to be climbing a mountain at 85?
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to share with your audience here. I'll be 72 in just a couple of weeks. Okay.
Unbelievable.
And, it's your mindset. I believe with every cell of my body that I am 45, because to me, 45 was that magic number. And
Okay.
that's when the major shifting and switching of everything in my life was impactful. My kids were all gone. I was out on my own, and life really changed. So all these different things that I learned along my journey. It's not that I'm 20 years old and a know-it-all, or I'm 30 years old and a know-it-all. I do have some things behind me, and being in holistic medicine for over 45 years, that makes a difference as well. And working with frequencies and working with how the aspects of everything in that body, the science behind it, alongside of where your thought processes and everything else is. It's not just one thing. It's everything put together. Right.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps your listeners,
I
to
think
try to
so.
give them food for thought and to really take it serious about what it is you're putting in Houston, in this meat suit you're running around in, and where do you want to go? Look at your future. Where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now? And it's never too late to start.
Yeah. I think, our
Too late to start.
culture, absolutely. I think our culture makes us feel like once you've hit maybe even 45, right? Like, oh, everything's downhill. And then, you just kind of expect that, oh, this hurts now. And like, there's even comedians that say, oh, that hurts now. Well, I guess this is forever. And you expect that as you get older, things start to break down and you can't, do things that you want to do anymore. But that's only because, one, we believe that that's how it's supposed to go.
Exactly.
And two, that we are eating ourselves to the point where we're sedentary, we're eating foods that cause inflammation, that make us feel terrible. And so of course, when you're 60, you can't climb a mountain, but you can look at people
Want to
like
bet?
you.
You want to bet?
What I'm saying. Like, yeah,
I was 60 and I was climbing 14 or so. That's yeah.
Yeah, like the people who are treating themselves badly, whether they realize that's what they're doing or not, are kind of in that position. But like there are people like you, and there's even Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and his wife Jane. They're in their 80s, and Jane, she walks around carrying a huge tire behind her, like as she does her morning calisthenics, and they are so vibrant. And I think Jane, or maybe it was Dr. Esselstyn, they turned 85 this year. So, and it's just, they are happy and living life, and they feel good in their bodies. And it's so obvious when you listen to them talk. There's just so much energy there. Like, you don't have to be 85 and slowly dying,
No.
like, yeah.
No, you don't. And that's all a choice. It's all a choice. It has to do with intentions. There's a saying out there. This is a quote: what the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And it all begins with a thought, and it all ends with a thought. Right? So what's going on in your brain? What is those thought processes that are taking place? What is defining your life? If you don't like what's defining your life, or if you don't know what's defining your life, stand in front of the mirror and ask yourself, what's defining my life? Oh my gosh. When I look at how I appear in there, where are those aging spots? Where is the breaking down of the human element? That's defining who you are. You're not able to run around and play football at 50 or 60 or 70 with your grandkids or your great grandkids because of what's defining you. But you know what? You can turn that around in a very short time. And it's not about taking a pill.
Right.
That only buffers and actually does more damage, because now you're not hearing the wake-up call, right?
Yeah.
And so therefore, you're going down even faster, right? And I don't know about you, but I love running around with my little great grandkids. The youngest one's 4 years old. Let me tell you, he's a bundle to keep up with, but I keep up with him.
Yeah.
right?
That's
And
amazing.
I wouldn't miss that. I wouldn't miss that for the world,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
there's more baby boomers out there. I mean, we're the ones that have set the pace for so many things, and baby boomers are still changing the world, right? So
Hmm.
we're a force to be reckoned with. I don't know what the percentages of baby boomers that are, working in that vegan diet area, but I can tell you there's a whole lot more of us now that are really stepping back to the roots of where we are in the food that we ingest. And we're not sitting down saying, I'm going to just surrender to what culture says I have to be.
Right.
Not a chance.
No way. So
So,
before we go, just wanted to touch on that hummus recipe.
oh, I knew you were going to get that out of me one way or another. Yeah, that's the only reason you asked me to show, so you could
I
get
guess
this
you
hummus
could just
recipe.
tell us how you like to eat hummus. That's okay too.
No, I'll happily share it with you.
Thank you.
This is the hummus show. And we talked about raw food
Hmm.
and how it actually matches up with, the vegan diet, and once I started making hummus myself, I mean, when you look in the store, and you read the hummus that you buy on the shelf, there's still a lot of things in there that aren't really healthy for the body. Your
Hmm.
preservatives and all that kind of stuff, because by law you have to put the stuff in there,
Right.
right? And so I decided, and this was in my raw food days, right? It's like, okay, there's got to be a way to make raw food hummus,
Mm,
right? Because most people, when they did make homemade hummus, they would just boil,
right.
right? And it's like, I don't want that. I want a different taste. I want to
Hmm.
really taste what that chickpea is all about,
Yeah.
right? So I started sprouting. So that's the key. First thing you got to
Oh,
do is you sprout your hummus. Now I
okay.
have a sprouter that is really cool. It does all the work for me. Okay. I love gadgets. Not gonna deny that. I love gadgets.
They're
And
fun.
so it's a two-part. So the whole machine probably stands maybe 12, 14 inches tall. And it's got a little motor in the bottom. And you put the water in the bottom. And then you put the top half on. And there's this little tube that comes up through the center, and it has a little thing on the top that sprays. It's kind of like
Okay.
when you're watering your garden and the water's squirting around. Okay,
Hmm.
just kind of minimize that, right?
Got
And
it.
it also keeps the temperature of the water in that perfect temperature, so that
Hmm.
your sprouts happen faster. Now
Okay.
I like to sprout my garbanzo beans, because you'll notice, oh my gosh, as soon as you put garbanzos in water, they swell like really
Hmm.
fast. So you got to watch it. Make sure you put more water in there. Okay. And one thing about sprouting too, which is really great for, a vegan diet, right, is that when you sprout, no matter what you sprout, your enzyme activity now is running high. And we talked
Ah,
about enzymes, right? So you should
yep.
always eat sprouts. I love mung beans, mung. I
Okay.
love mung beans, right? And so back to the garbanzos. Okay. So and I don't measure anything.
Okay.
I go by sight and by taste. So I'll give you everything in the recipe, and then you build it out. I'll give you an idea of how much to use, but I
Yeah.
never measure anything. It's different every single time.
Okay.
And that's what makes it unique. So make
Hmm.
this recipe unique for you, but I'll give you all the secrets. So if when you sprout your garbanzo beans, at least 3 days. So that sprout end is I want to say, at least an inch long,
Okay.
because it really makes it tender. And just eat them raw. Eat a garbanzo bean raw like that. And it's like, at first it might taste a little,
Mm,
because you're not used to it, but you'll get used to it.
okay.
And then, so once you have that, then you want to make sure that you rinse them all off and leave the white tails on them. Don't take the tails off, because what's going to happen when you start rinsing them there's all beans have a shell on the outside. And so with the garbanzos, that shell is going to fall loose and it'll float to the top. So you want to take that shell out again, because you don't want to put that in your hummus, because it's going to what? It's not going to digest.
Yeah.
Right. So just take all those off. I mean, if there's a few of them that are on there and you want to try to pluck them off, you don't have to get that intense and that serious, right? And then you just use a food processor. Okay. And you can make any kind of flavored, hummus that you want. You can make fruit hummus, or you can make a vegetable hummus, right? Yeah. And get creative. I like to put garlic in everything. Just why? Because garlic is really good, right? And so let's just say maybe you've got some garlic that was starting to sprout. Oh my goodness, use those in your hummus. Those are great. Right? Okay. Because again, it's that fermentation. So whenever you're eating fermented beans of any kind, and if you're making soup, try that sometime. Yeah. Your kidney beans, your black beans, your white beans, all of them. Right? Sprout them for a couple of days. If nothing else, just soak them at least overnight. But it starts that enzyme activity. And then, so now that you got your garbanzo beans where you want them, make sure that you have a jar of tahini, which is sesame seed, right? Yeah. So you want to get a jar of tahini. If you want to make your own tahini, stuff, you can. That's another story. I don't get that creative. I buy the tahini that's already just the tahini by itself. Right. And so depending on the size of your food processor, use anywhere from 2 to 3 cups, put the lid on it, and then you'll want water, but be careful with your water. Add a little bit, and start breaking it down. And you want to put it on, after it's broken down, then you want to put it on high speed. And then you add a little bit more water to get your texture. Now, depending on what you're using, because if you're using like artichokes, use that artichoke juice. Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah. Don't throw that out. So if you're going to do that, then use that as some of the liquid, right? But if it gets too liquid, what do? Add some more garbanzos, right? It's plain and simple, right? That's what I'm saying. Don't have to measure. Yeah. And, but before you started adding any of the solid, fruit in, or even the tomatoes, because tomatoes are going to leave their juices as well. So try to get kind of a little, maybe just a little more softer than a peanut butter texture when you're putting those garbanzos together. Right. And just kind of, you might have to open it and smash down the sides, with your little spatula, and then get it going again, but add that little bit of water. So once you have that, it doesn't take a whole lot of tahini. So if you're starting with 2 cups, maybe use like 2 tablespoons of tahini. Okay. Right. And you don't have to exactly measure, just scoop it out and put it in there, and scoop it out and put it in there. Right. That's the fun of it. That's really the fun of it. Right. And then, then whip it together. And then you'll also want to squeeze in usually about 2 cups on average, depending on how much juice is in that lemon. Right. Maybe like a half a lemon if it's a big lemon, or if it's a small lemon, use the whole thing, but don't put it all in at once. Again, you're bringing it together. Taste a little bit, and you do want to add a little bit of salt, because salt generates a breakdown of the enzymes as well. You need salt in the stomach to break the food down. A no salt diet is not healthy. You need salt in the stomach to break the food apart. Right. So you can, you can use that if you want to test the waters with amino acids and put a little. Amino acids are very, very salty. Yeah. Right. So just be careful. Again, if you get too much salt, what are you going to do? Add water and more garbanzo beans. More garbanzo beans, not water. And this like, this thing is full. Well, you know what? Scoop half of it out. Put in some more, right? And this is why you want the consistency of the garbanzos before you start adding in the element of the flavor of what you're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
you can put your garlic in there, as soon as you want. You can put, if you're doing avocado, or not avocado, artichokes, put
Hmm.
that juice in, use that juice,
Right.
right? And get that consistency. Once you have that consistency pretty close, then go ahead and start adding your tomatoes. If you're going to make a tomato base, tomato
Hmm.
garlic is really good. If you want to
Oh,
put
never done
peppers in
that.
there, the different kind of peppers,
Hmm.
take the seeds out. Just a little word to the wise. Seeds do what? They do not digest. Okay,
Ah.
so take the seeds out. Okay, if you want it a little hotter than what the peppers are going to give you, put a little cayenne in there. That's a good thing, right?
Okay.
So, you know, but I made a habanero. It was going to
Ooh.
a vegan. It was a vegan. No, actually, it was a raw food party that we went to, and so I made raw food hummus in different ones, and I took a small amount of the habanero. I mean,
Hmm.
it was hot, but boy, the flavor was so divine, so divine.
Oh my
And again,
gosh.
be cautious when you're putting in hot peppers.
Yeah.
Whip it up and then taste it.
Hmm.
And then if it's not quite, but and no, the longer you let your raw hummus set, the hotter it gets.
Oh,
Okay?
that is good to
Yeah.
know.
It's good to know. Yeah. The hotter it gets, the longer it sits. And you can freeze this, by the way. So you can freeze it.
Okay.
Yeah. And it will last so much longer in the refrigerator. It'll last 2-3 weeks. It would no
Really?
problem. It's fermented.
Right. Okay. That makes
So if
sense.
you start looking at what are the health benefits of fermented food, hey, here you go.
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of great things that come out of it. So basically you've got your sprouted hummus, you've got your tahini,
Hmm.
you got your lemon juice, and you got your salt.
Right.
And then you just add whatever it is that you want to make the flavor of. Like when I do tomato, I like to do fresh tomatoes. And what I do is I boil water and I just kind of, just kind of put them in the water just long enough to get the skin off, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so you still have, the tomatoes value itself. But I also like to put sun-dried tomatoes in there.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, because there's just something about it. And the juice on the sun-dried tomatoes, right? But also you want to add olive oil, right?
Okay.
Or you can add sometimes if you want to, if you're not using that. I wouldn't use coconut oil because
Mm.
it does have a different flavor to it. But you can get the one that doesn't have the flavor. And if you want to try that, but olive oil seems to give it that little flavor that you don't get when you're using some of the other oils. But don't overkill with
Right.
the oil. So when you're starting that mixing, go ahead and put some of that olive oil in first, and then add the rest
Okay.
with the water, right? So you want to make sure that you do. So now you've got garbanzo bean sprouted, tahini, olive oil, salt, and lemon juice.
Yeah.
And if you want a little more, if you want, if you really like that tahini taste, add a little more tahini. There's
Hmm.
no right or wrong way to do this. Do it to the taste that is palatable for your
Right.
mouth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But just be careful with the hot peppers.
Right. For sure. Especially if you're using habanero.
Yeah, especially if you're using habaneros, that's exact, or even or Thai.
Yeah.
If you're using the little Thai peppers, woo,
Hmm.
and I think what is it, the sabanos? There's
Mm.
some really super hot ones out there. So just take a little caution. But if you do and it does get too hot, well, guess what? Take one of your other ones and mix it together,
Hmm.
right?
There you
Because
go.
no matter what it is that you're putting in that hummus, they all flow together very, very nicely,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you. Beverly,
Yeah,
this has been so interesting. And I know for sure that my listeners will appreciate this. And the people who hear it are the people who are meant to hear it. And your message
exactly.
is definitely for them. And I I'm so thankful that you joined me tonight because I've learned so much. This is so great. Thank you.
Boy, you're welcome. And like I said, it's not just one thing, it's a combination of. So if you're thinking about becoming a vegan and you want to start altering your diet, really study the nutritional aspect of it. Get that food combining chart. Start there.
Hmm.
Really understand because, when you're moving away from the meat and the meat byproducts and the dairy, you want to know what that combination of. So study raw food. And then if you want to cook it, that's fine. But it will give you the combination to make sure you're getting the nutrition to keep your body functioning in full alignment.
Yeah.
So that's the words of wisdom that I can leave your audience with.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you were here with me.
Oh, it was an honor. It was an honor.
Welcome back. Don't worry if you didn't catch the hummus recipe as Beverly walked us through it. You'll find the details in the show notes. I've also included the raw food combining chart as well as some information from nutritionfacts.org related to food combining. You can find Beverly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and listen to her own podcast, Wisdom 360 Wisdom Speaks. All links to contact Beverly can be found in the show notes. I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're loving it, please give Did You Bring the Hummus a 5-star rating. It's an easy way to keep supporting the show. You are also invited to join my free private Facebook group for fans of the show. You can find the link in the show notes. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Did You Bring the Hummus and visit my website at www.didyouBringthehummus.com for more information about me, updates on what I'm working on, new podcast episodes, and all things vegan. I would love to hear from you. What do you need help with? Is there a topic you want to hear covered on a future episode? DM me on Instagram or send me an email at didyouBringthehummus@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.